Here's a fun spot. 5-3 suited on the button.
I think if bounties are more relevant, it's the kind of hand I'd look to possibly get in with. But I think we want to start with something a bit stronger, personally. It certainly wouldn't be the worst score I've ever seen, but I think probably more like 6-5 in this IFCM environment. I know we cover maybe even as tight as sort of 7-6.
Just out of interest, obviously this isn't perfect. This is PKO, but it might function similarly enough.
46. Yeah, this is 46 versus the button covering. This looks quite good.
I mean, for what it's worth, Lauren, I know, likes to get in the mix. He likes to open some more of these suited connector type hands. I can't see him folding a pair. Can't see him folding some of these hands, but obviously let's go with what we've got.
It's going to be probably 5-4. Yeah. Oh wow, it's getting in there a bit. Okay, interesting. Having seen this, what are your thoughts? I mean, I've got a couple of thoughts, but you go.
Pleasantly surprised to see that this hand is indifferent in theory at something similar we look at. But I can tell you what I was thinking in game. For a start, obviously it's a bounty I cover. That's more incentive to be involved. I'm on the button, which is again more incentive to be involved. It's best position. I cover the opener. It's actually nicer, I think, to call a hand like this against an earlier position range because he doesn't interact with these cards. So he's got a very dense like offsuit Broadway, suited medium to high cards. So when this hand hits, when I hit like a straight or trips or two pair, it's very disguised, and often it will be against top pair or an over pair, so it's a really good hand for stacking people. I think I actually saw people who I respect doing stuff like this in bounties, although not as much in the later stages of a tournament, and that's where I picked this up. Like, I wouldn't have intuitively thought to do this until maybe sometime early, maybe in like January this year. I picked up this sort of stuff, and again, I wasn't 100% sure this would be a thing in theory, but I thought as an exploit where people don't squeeze enough behind, people make mistakes post flop, it's only going to go up and up. So if it's indifferent or if it's close to break even, then I thought it could become profitable. It still might be a bridge too far. Like, I think looking at the theory does reassure me that this is good, and we do cover him by a bit more than the sim we're looking at and what are the other stacks in this situation. This time we are covered in practice by someone afterwards, but it's someone that I think is more liable to call a wide range as opposed to go nuts, although obviously Ron is definitely capable of squeezing, but we're kind of protected by the fact under the gun's opened. Yeah, I think I like this call. These sort of hands, they do quite well in these situations. You'd rather call a hand like this than a hand like King 10 offsuit. It makes sense because of just the way it interacts with the ranges.
All of what you said is fair and reasonable, but I don't agree with you, if I'm honest. Couple of reasons why. There is a heavier incentive to VPIP here in a PKO compared to the current situation here, because we're in a mystery bounty where the big bounties are all gone. Not only does knocking someone out give us a certain amount of money in the pocket now, which we can work out obviously based upon their bounty, but also it affects our ability to have more access to the prize pool later. And when you're deep in a tournament in a PKO, that's worth a lot more than in the mystery bounty. The other thing is, in my mind, the small and big blind will continue too wide here in a live environment. People call way too much, in my opinion, multi-way. If we were to check what the big blind is supposed to defend closing the action here or the small blind, my assumption would be that we're going to go 3 and 4 ways way more than we're supposed to. So we can have a quick look. And,
All these suited kings, they're never
Ron's
folding ace-2, ace-3 suited. Well, in this case, he covers us both, so he is actually going to call more.
And once again, the big blind too. We saw, I think, someone in the last video, was it Brandon, defend the jack deuce to jack 3 suited or 10-4 suited in a spot they're not supposed to. You know, the dominated ace offsuit ace-x is probably going to defend. That interacts with when we make our 2 pair and our straight. So like the ace-5 off, we're going to do worse on a 5 high board, for example. I think that there's a lot basically to be said about we don't want to go multi-way, and I think we will too much. And the final point I was going to make, can we see the same solution basically for the chip EV response? Because I think that we're actually closer to chip EV, in my opinion, here than we are to a PK. I just think it's a smidge too loose.
That's like 45 into 50.
Well, it's not as different as I thought, though. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realise that. I kind of thought it would be 6-5 in chips. 5-4's indifferent as a 6-5.
These hands are all pretty similar.
I stand corrected. I think this is much closer than I think. I still might go 5-4 myself, but it's certainly closer than I thought. Maybe I'm overestimating that. Is it so terrible to go 3 ways? I just think that, like I say, the big blind just comes along with loads of stuff that dominates us more than they're supposed to. That's what I'm kind of concerned about. But
I think there's 2 schools of thought. One is, yeah, more people getting in with more equity is bad, because when I call small blind in ICM here doesn't have an overcall range. Obviously in bounties and different stuff, it'll make more sense for them too. So there's going to be a lot more calls here. That's a lot more equity. But I think they're also going to have a lot less squeezes. These are different stacks. Obviously, it's not perfect, but I think the big blind isn't going to bluff as much. So we're not going to be squeezed out of the pot as much. So that might balance out kind of both sides of the coin. Yeah, we go multi-way more and we lose some equity share. It's hard to get cooled with our hand. I mean, unless we get like trips over trips, it's pretty hard to lose a big pot, whereas most other hands that kind of can happen. It's more likely that you're going to be top pair over top paired than trips over tripped, etc. So I'm pretty confident with my post flop ability. So in any spot where it tends to be on the closer side, I'll be happy to kind of get in the mix. If I knew here these guys are going to call a little bit wide, that wouldn't deter me from playing this spot. If I thought they were going to squeeze extra wide, and like Ron is is viable to play aggressive. That does deter me a little bit. But then I also think Lawrence is pretty wild too, and he's liable to open a bit wider and play a bit more splashy post flop. I think there's a lot of variables. I thought it was a close spot as well. Can see I haven't even called yet, and I am like eyeing up the stack, eyeing up the situation. And it'd be funny if I just fold now after all this, but I'm pretty sure I call. It is clearly very close. Ron finds a hand he can squeeze, so I guess we'll find out very quickly how good this is. There is still a 5k bounty in play. Obviously, this tournament is 200 plus 200. That's still 25 buy-in bounty that's still in play. Obviously, it's not 20k or 10k, whatever the biggest one might have been, but it's pretty big. It could be worth 1 big blind. It could be worth 3 big blinds. It could be worth 0.5 big blinds, and that's going to make a huge difference too. Obviously, if the bounties are worth like 5 bigs, then you'd be pretty happy to be in the mix here with 5 free suited covering. If the bounties are worth 0.2, then it's almost like it's a vanilla. It's just a normal ICM spot. That is going to make a big difference, and I can't give you the perfect answer, but I can say that it's somewhere between a little bit and a moderate amount of relevance. And very interestingly, Ron finds the overcall with ace queen.
Bet Gary completes, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem, because like you say, looking at these 4 hands, as you said yourself, it's going to be hard for us to get coolers here, right? Unless it comes king 5-3 or 3-3x. But it's just a spot where now look at our equity share. It's not great, although Ron's is somehow worse, which is funny.
I would pure squeeze ace queen off here as Ron. And that doesn't mean you have to call off. If you squeeze here, you can make it like 230 to 270k sort of range. You do have to side call off if the big blind jams, but obviously that's fine. You play for the bounty, heads up, you're doing fine. If under the gun then jams, you can just fold ace queen. That's fine. If you don't think he's bluffing enough, if you think his range is jacks plus ace king type of range and like the occasional ace 5 suited, then you can just get away. You're not getting the best price if he puts in 1.1 million. You've only put in 270k. Just because you're free betting with a strong hand that's doing well against calls doesn't mean you're committed to the next step, or that you have to be fearful of the next step, because in this case maybe you lose less. Like if we get the queen high board here, maybe we end up saving money by just free bet folding.
I think that's a great point to make. Sometimes I think people choose not to 3-bet a hand in a situation because they're kind of like, what if? Sometimes a guy will open the button, right? People don't want to 3-bet the small blind because what if I have to 3-bet fold? If the guy's opening 50% on the button, and even if he jams 10% of hands, that's only 20% of the time he jams, right? Most of the time you're not going to face that 4-bet jam or that 4-bet click or whatever it is. Just to close out the point about the 5-3 call, because I did think of something just before the Ron discussion started. I think you make a very good point, mate. I still maybe would have preference just for a bit tighter 5-4 or 6-5 myself. As I said, it's just a personal preference. But I think that when you feel you can maneuver, it's a very fair point. Sometimes I think based upon your opponents, when a hand is indifferent in theory, that can become very winning or very losing. If it's like 2 of the top players in the world in the blinds and like a very good player's opened as well, I would say that a break-even pill with 5-3 becomes a losing pill for me, right? Whereas if it's an environment where you feel you can maneuver post, you're going to be under squeezed, you're going to know when to be able to value bet when you make your hand, you're going to get your adequate bluffs through, etc., and you're going to be able to hand read better than these guys. Possible that 5-3 slightly losing and 5-4 break even, but actually you turn them all into much more EV than they're supposed to be in theory. So I think that's fair, and that's a very good point to bear in mind, guys. It's okay to look at a solver and a hand be losing 0.01, 0.02 or break even. If we're pretty sure we can overturn that, get in the mix.
Look ahead a little bit. For one, when a solver gives you the EV, it's often accounting for everyone playing perfectly post flop. And you could argue that I probably won't bluff enough with this hand because people don't fold enough, but that's just a reason why I'm going to make more the times I make a good hand. People don't fold enough. And if you look ahead to the hands that these players are supposed to squeeze, and you just see even 1 or 2 hands that you don't think they're ever squeezing, they're supposed to squeeze, that's going to quickly make the hand just profitable, because that's just one point that we get to realize more equity with our hand, which is more profit. So in this case, as you can see, Ron didn't squeeze ace queen, which I'm assuming is a pure squeeze when he covers everyone, and this dynamic is happening. The big blind, I think, does have a pure call, but you can see now that we've got our, in this case, 18% equity share in the pot, and we're in position, so we have more equity realization. I think it's just going to be a good time, even though obviously you can see I'm dominated, unfortunately, by the big blind, so unless we get like the free board, which is going to be pretty rare, I feel like it's going to be a pretty nice hand to play. I don't really remember what happens in this hand, but
the other thing as well is that you're going to have lots of easy getaways like a flop like this, but also if you look at the hands the way they're distributed, in the times when you make 2-pair or a set, 2-pair or a straight or trips, other than in the case, like I say, Gary dominates us, we're probably going to put lots of money in against like Ron. Let's say we make a wheel, Ron's going to have made a strong top pair or better, right? Let's say we make 2-pair or trips, Lawrence going to have made a strong overpair. So that's very fair as well. Like I feel like you're going to cooler people less than you're going to get cooled in this environment. Yeah, now we just end up in some random 4-way show which checks through, and probably check through again, right? Wouldn't be shocked to see Gary fire, but I actually think against uncapped ranges with the weakest king, I think we just want to knuckle again and try and keep the spot small.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable check as Gary, because if you bet twice, are you really going to get called twice by an ace? Like Ron has the next best hand. He has top pair top kicker now, and it's hard for that hand to call 2 bets when there's 4 ranges involved. It's easy for someone to have a king. It's very conventional for Lauren to check back with a lot of king X on the flop. I think check turn, go for like a big river street, be polarized seems to be nice, or at least then you've got a nice defense. If Lauren bets twice, you just have to call twice. Maybe bluff sometimes, maybe get called sometimes, maybe sometimes he value cuts himself with a hand like ace queen.
And the other thing as well is if you start betting every king here, yeah, this is interesting. If you start betting every king here as Gary on the turn, the kind of, I guess, immediately obvious point to make is what happens to your checking range now? It's fucked, right? You probably at least consider shoving some pocket eights pre-flop with all the money in the middle. You
Never have ace king.
don't have ace king, don't have kings, probably shouldn't have ace eight off. He might do, probably shouldn't. Don't have king eight off. So king X is really your ceiling, along with maybe the odd bit of pocket eights if you decide not to shove them pretty. So you're really struggling to make strong hands here. And a lot of your range is going to be ace deuce suited, 8-7 suited, jack 10 or whatever. If you start leading every time you have a king, when you check, you're fucked. You're never going to be able to realize, and you're going to get blown off your equity too often. It's also nice to conceal the strength of your hand. Let Laurent fire out here with something maybe he shouldn't do. Let Brandon decide to bluff his gut shot on the turn here, when he's dead against you almost. Like let people take stabs at it when they've got stronger ranges than you. You need to be aware of that. This is a general point, guys. Multi-way in the big blind. I see people put too much money in with good hands and sometimes good bluffs. But I think a lot of the time as the big blind in a multi-way coup, especially when the flop checks through, we just need to check because often the original raiser, like Laurent here, is supposed to be uncapped. In this case, Laurent would very naturally, as you say, Brandon, get here with a hand like boats, like eights and aces, king, queen, king, jack, king 10, king 9 can all still get here very, very comfortably. So not only are you facing uncapped ranges, but you want to protect your checking range. So I think in general, just being more passive multi-way out of the big blind is key.
I agree. It might even be a range check as the big blind here because it's just so hard to construct a betting range. Well, if you do, it would be a very small bet, I imagine, because if you're betting an ace, you need to get called by worse. If you're betting a king, you need to get called by worse. So it might be that you just have some blocks sometimes, just like with some gut shots, with some king X, with some ace X, but it's tough. It's really tough because there's not even a flush draw here. It's so hard to have equity. Like at most, you have a gut shot, right? If you don't have a pair, I really don't like Lawrence bet here with queens. He's doing this little block, but his hand needs the least protection. So if you had a hand like pocket nines in a spot where it's really hard for someone to have like tens, jacks, queens, it would make a lot more sense to bet. I don't know if I would bet that hand, but I think it would make more sense for the properties of the hand to like, I hope I just take it down now. Everyone's shown passivity twice, so I'm just going to take a stab. But queens needs no protection. If you're against an ace or a king, which is the only hands I think you get called by when you bet, you only have 2 outs. And if you're against a hand that was worse, then like Jack 10's drawing dead against us because we have the boat covered as well. So it's at most you got to dodge 2 outs really, and that's by under pairs or 8x. It just needs no protection. You got 3% equity in this case because someone has a king or an ace, you would have the same equity against an ace. Oh, I guess the queen's covered. That's why he only has 3 instead of like 5. But yeah, you're gonna have 2 outs against the core range most of the time here, and if it checks through, it's fine. You can just check down to the river and hope you're good. You don't need to protect this hand.
I think it's a situation probably where he's just thinking, right, I'm not going to get raised here very often. I get to put a little bit of money in and check the river. I might be able to get called by worse. But I think if you break the hand down, you're exactly right. Like pocket 7s or 5s make a lot more sense to bet here. You could actually protect against some of those gut shots and get a better hand to maybe fold. Queens and jacks seem like the most absolutely stone blank checks we could possibly have here. Needing no protection, they actually block the gut shots that maybe would have the 4 outs against them. It just feels like he wants to bet so he doesn't have to face a bet. He wants to bet small himself, so not to face a bigger bet and have a decision. And then he's kind of just hoping for 3 folds, not really thinking too deeply about ranges. I could be wrong, obviously, but that's just the way it feels like. I want to get to showdown cheap and not face a half pot bet here and have a decision. I think that's often what happens, I think, in multi-way pots, because they're very difficult, obviously, multi-way.
Lauren, not a man that likes to check twice. For the most part, it is a pretty good strat. When everyone checks at least once, a lot of the time everyone's going to have nothing. He's going to bet and just win here. But obviously, in this case, you can see the ranges are protected. We've got top pair, top kicker. We've got good trips. And now we have a very inconsequential 2. So how do you expect this river action is going to go?
The whole hand is obviously a bit all over the place in the sense that, in my mind, we both have Ron missing a pure squeeze pre and is therefore not meant to have a hand this good, and then Laurent missing a pure check on the turn. The hands they're supposed to have, the only person in my mind who's played the hand so far perfectly is Gary. Having said that, very little money went in on the turn. It's very easy because I can see the hand. But I think that Laurent is often going to have a weaker ace. So I think if I'm Gary, I'm thinking, right, Laurent can definitely have a king, but he maybe would put more money in with it. Ron probably has some kind of an ace because of the way the hand has played out. I think if I'm Gary, I don't know whether I'd find this in game. We're 15 left. It's a very complex spot. We've gone 4 ways to a turn. I would really like to see Gary block here. So there's a couple of reasons why. If he check, I don't think Lawrence is going to bluff too much into 2 players here. So the EV of you now having a king, in my opinion, comes from can we get called with a small bet by an ace? If they've got a stronger king than us, we're going to have to put money in anyway. If Lawrence got a strong king or he's trapped a boat, we're going to find out the moment he says all in, or we're going to find out when he puts a large bet in on the river. And we're not, by the way, in a very good spot if we check and then Lawrence fires 3/4 pot, by the way, in my opinion, on the river. It's a very tough spot.
Yeah.
So, and again, we can see the hands, and I want to stress that. And I'm not sure I would find this in game, but I'd love to see Gary bet like 110. I'd think that would be very cool, like 90. I think that'd be really, really cool. There's someone's got an ace. We can get value from it. Yes, it doesn't look like you've got many bluffs, but I think it's very cool.
When I bet as Lawrence on the turn, I would have, some bluffs, which I guess are mainly constructed around gut shots, some kind of weird pocket pair merges, like maybe you can make an 8-fold if you have 7s, like you said, or pocket 9s just to deny the equity. And if I had an ace, I'd probably start with ace-9. I'd probably want a kicker that plays, so it actually gets value from all the ace-X. I'd probably check with all my ace-2 to ace-7 and ace-8. I'd say Lawrence is obviously in one of those categories. When Ron calls, he probably has an ace a lot. Maybe sometimes he has a weak king too. And then when Gary overcalls, he can have, I guess, any ace-X because of the price too. I think we're mainly looking at 3 ranges, which are some king X, but mainly all 3 players are going to have ace-X. And obviously an ace is just a more common card to have in ranges because Big Lon will have the most offsuit aces. Ron's going to have every suited ace, but he might not have every suited kings. And we might see a raise on the turn sometimes with a king. What do you think about Ron leading the river, having top paired the best kicker?
That's pretty interesting as well. I just think that 3-way, it's too likely that someone's found the king because Gary can have everyone suited. And obviously, as we can see, evidently he does. Ron, 20% river. 75k could be very cool as well. Lawrence getting a really, really good price when he has ace 10 plus, or any kicker that plays ace 9 plus. Same for Gary. Lawrence very often going to have like some kind of an ace that's reopened with a kicker. And
he's probably not going to value bet with ace 9 or ace 10 on the river anymore.
And Ron having ace queen is actually really interesting because Ron blocked both Lawrence best king X, king queen, but also blocks Lawrence queen 10, queen jack, which is most likely bluff. So I think Ron is very often ahead of Lawrence, particularly with ace queen, both because it's the best kicker ace, but also because he blocks the most likely king X, but also
the hand size was so small too.
Yeah, exactly. He's least likely to have bluffs. It's a very interesting spot. Like I say, I know I can see the hands, but yeah, I think Ron or Gary finding a tiny lead is actually really cool because you probably just get to bet fold in both cases as well. He does find it. That's really interesting. I don't think I'd personally ever find this, but I get it. He thinks Lawrence got an ace. He's going to check back a bunch. If Gary's got a king, he's got a king anyway. I don't think I'd find this, but I think it's pretty cool. This is super interesting now, by the way, because
to raise his carry.
Sorry, he's already called, so I meant whether to jam as Lawrence or raise as Lawrence. Because Lawrence, this is a super fucked up spot now. So I don't think I'd raise as Gary because I don't think you're perceived to bluff, and I don't think you're going to get called by worse. And Lawrence sat behind you uncapped and is the only one that has aces, kings, and 8s pure. I know he blocked this, but whatever. Ace, king, sorry, 8s and aces and stuff, pure pre-flop. This is pretty wild, but I would play the hand exactly the same all streets as Gary as played. Ron, I think, found quite a sexy river lead, which can actually get value, and you can just fold to a raise. I think having 2 queens as Lawrence is now one of the best possible bluffs you can get here with, and I'll tell you why. So I don't think you want to have an ace or an 8 because boats don't exist for them. Because in my opinion, Ron doesn't have ace king or aces. Maybe Ron has 8. Maybe Ron has 8, but I don't think he plays the hand like this. I don't think he check calls turn and then leads tiny. I think that Gary probably only has 8s occasionally pre-flop. Yeah, I mean, not that you need to necessarily construct a bluffing range here, but I think Lawrence having 2 queens there, like I say, he blocks both their king queen.
Queen off is one of the, because it's an offsuit hand, yeah.
And also, what the fuck's he going to be perceived to bluff there with? Like, Lawrence can definitely have aces, ace, king, and 8s here. He's the only one that can definitely have all the boats as played most frequently. I'm not saying he would play that. I'm not saying he would always check the flop with them and only bet that sizing on the turn.
It's pretty incredible, though, ace, king, and aces.
I agree. I think it's very credible ace, king, and aces. He goes like 500k on the river. I think Gary folds personally, and Ron definitely folds. In my opinion, again, it's very easy seeing the cards, but I would never get to the river with queens, right? So I'd never be in the position to bluff that. But I think
if we get there, then it becomes pretty nice. Yeah, I agree.
Queen Jack would maybe be one you would get there with. That would then be interesting because again, same reason you would block King Jack and King Queen, maybe.